All right, today we're diving into a pretty unconventional and honestly a really surprising way of looking at salvation. This comes from a very specific theological text, and our goal here is simple. We're just going to break down the author's argument step by step. We're not here to say if it's right or wrong, just to understand how it all fits together. So let's get into it.
And boom, right out of the gate, the author hits us with this bombshell of a question. This one idea is literally the key that unlocks their entire way of thinking. It goes against what a lot of people believe and sets the stage for a completely different perspective on what it takes to be saved.
So, where do we start? We start with the foundation of their whole argument, what they call a radically easy salvation. This is the central pillar holding up everything else we're about to explore.
And you can really feel the why behind this whole thing in this quote. This isn't just some dry academic exercise for the author. It's like they're trying to solve this deep, personal puzzle that's been bugging them. This question is the engine that drives their entire interpretation.
So how do they start building this case? Well, they look at scriptures like the Gospel of John, but they zoom in on one specific word, receive. In their view, that word is even more important than believe. They argue that the simple act of receiving someone, maybe through hospitality or just a small act of kindness, is what triggers God's grace, even if you don't have a fully formed faith.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. The author grounds this whole thing in one specific story from the Bible, which they see as the absolute cornerstone for their entire argument, the case of Simon the Pharisee.
So, in the author's reading of this story from Luke's Gospel, Simon the Pharisee, he's not a believer, not even close. He doesn't think Jesus is the Messiah. He doesn't even think he's a real prophet. And yet, Jesus forgives his sins, silently, without Simon even asking for it. And why? According to the author, it all comes down to one single good work.
And this is where you can see their logic laid out, step by step. It's a simple chain reaction in their eyes. First, you have the work. Simon invites Jesus into his house. Second, the grace. Jesus forgives him. And third, the result, salvation. For the author, this sequence is proof positive that a good work can lead directly to salvation, completely bypassing the need for explicit belief.
But wait, it doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. The author then argues that this incredible power to forgive wasn't just for Jesus. It was passed on. It was delegated to an entire institution.
And the whole argument for that hinges on this one verse. When Jesus forgives a man's sins, the crowd praises God for giving this power not to a man, but to men, plural. For this author, that little s at the end of the word, it changes everything. They see it as concrete proof of a transfer of authority.
So if you follow that logic, the conclusion is pretty clear. This power wasn't a one-off thing for Jesus. It was a gift passed down to people, specifically in this interpretation, to the church and its priests, who now hold that same authority to forgive sins right here on earth.
And once you accept that idea of delegated authority, well, a lot of other things suddenly click into place for this author. It becomes the justification for several key church practices, like confession to a priest, priests giving penance, the concept of indulgences, and even the authority of church councils to make binding decisions.
Okay, so if you thought that was a big leap, get ready, because this is where the implications of this framework just explode. We're not just talking about saving the living anymore. This logic extends to those who have already died. You know that question that so many people wrestle with? What about my loved ones who passed away without faith? Well, this theological system tackles that question head-on, and it offers a very direct and, for some, a very comforting answer. And to back this up, they point to a verse that, let's be honest, has confused theologians for centuries. But for this author, it's not confusing at all. They see it as plain as day evidence that people can perform actions and rituals on behalf of those who have already passed on.
So what does that lead to? This idea of intercession. The thinking is that our good works, our prayers, they're not just for us. They can actually reach across the veil of death and help secure salvation for other people, whether they're on earth or in purgatory. It's almost like a spiritual economy of grace.
And they bring this power right down to the kitchen table, to the family. They take that promise to the jailer, believe, and you will be saved, you and your household, and they mean it literally. In this view, one person's faith can act like a spiritual umbrella, powerful enough to cover and save their entire family, both living and dead.
Okay, so right about now you might be thinking, hang on a second, what about salvation by faith, not by works? Well, the author anticipates that, and they make a really critical distinction. And after that, we're going to touch on something else they see as incredibly powerful,
our words.
You really got to get this part to understand their whole argument. To solve that classic faith versus works debate, they basically split works into two different categories. On one side, you have works of the law. Following the rules, avoiding evil. They say, no, those won't save you. But on the other side, you have good works of mercy, acts of compassion and kindness. Those, in this system, are the ones that can actually open the door to salvation.
Now, let's shift gears for a second to another huge concept in this framework, the power of your words. They lean heavily on verses like this one from Proverbs, arguing that what we say isn't just hot air. It's a creative force that can bring about actual life or death.
And they see Jesus confirming this right here. And notice the key phrase, whoever says. The author really emphasizes that. This isn't some special power for a select few. It's presented as a universal law, like gravity. They're arguing that anyone can literally speak reality into existence, for good or for bad.
So what's the bottom line here? Our words are incredibly powerful. They're like loaded weapons. According to the author, if you mix them with even a tiny spark of faith, you can trigger huge real-world consequences. You can create miracles, or you can create disasters. It's both an incredible opportunity and a massive warning.
And that's what it all comes down to, really. After walking through this entire system, we're left with this one big question. If a single act of kindness can save someone who doesn't even believe, and one person's prayer can save their whole family, both living and dead, what does that tell us about the nature of divine mercy? This framework paints a picture of a mercy that is almost shockingly accessible. And whether you agree with it or not, man, it definitely gives you something to chew on.